What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Bill's Chat Live. I am Josh McCarty. And before we get this show off the ground tonight, I have to cop to one thing. I'm having internet issues. And if you're watching the show tonight, I might look like I'm choppy, and I think my voice might be a little choppy here and there. It was an absolute pain in the butt working from home today. But you guys don't want to hear me complain. So you'll just deal with what it is, and we'll try to work through it. Luke will just throw something at the screen if it gets too unbearable. But speaking of Luka, how are you doing tonight?
I like how when you said you were having internet issues, it actually cut out as you said internet issues. It made it
Right
perfect,
on,
Josh.
right on
On cue. Yeah, it's awesome. Doing good. It was an interesting work week. I'm happy to be here. That's for sure. I was happy to. I wasn't even able to kind of do my full normally like week long progressive research on my locks. It was kind of a cram session today, although I do feel very good about them when we get to that part. But it's I'm glad we're here because now we can talk about something that's very, very entertaining. And man, Roy, that's a shot. My hair is fabulous. All right, let's not take a shot at my hair.
At least Luka has hair.
There we go. Cuts out on cue. So I'm just poking fun all night about it, Josh. So I'm doing good. I'm glad we got a great game to talk about and stuff like that. And then we have a show leading into what hopefully will be a phenomenal weekend.
Let's set the agenda for Luka. We're obviously going to be diving into this Bills-Dolphins matchup, a huge Bills-Dolphins matchup, the biggest one in recent memory. I want to ask you how big of a game this is. We obviously got some news today regarding a couple of big-name players on both sides, with the same initials, by the way, that won't be playing in this game. And I want to talk about the impact on what that will be for both teams. You and I will be making our game predictions. I have some thoughts on what the Bills can do to try to slow down right now what is looking like a historical Miami Dolphins offense. And then we obviously have Luka's locks, which is his best bet for the NFL weekend. But Luka, before we get into the nitty gritty of this game, let's just talk about surface level. How big of a game is this, considering the fact that the Bills and the Dolphins really historically in our lifetimes have never both been this good at the same time?
When it comes to the rivalry, this feels like one of the biggest in the rivalry that it's been for a long time. It's definitely that feel to me in my lifetime. I'll just put it because I never got to experience really Kelly versus Marino. I was too young to kind of conceptualize that era, of course, if I was even born. So to me, when it comes to the rivalry, isolated, Thurman Thomas infamously. I mean, he just said, and it's kind of gone around where he goes, "It's Miami week," and he said it bold to his buddy Steve Tasker on One Bills Live. It's definitely got its hype right now. But in the context of the NFL landscape and the regular season for the Bills and Dolphins, yes, it's a divisional game. Yes, it's an early test for both. Yes, it has divisional implications where if you're the Dolphins, for instance, you have a chance to go up 2.5 games on the next best team in your own division if you come out of this game with a win. But overall, it's still early enough in the season where I wouldn't, if I were McDermott or McDaniel, if I was a coach in this game, I wouldn't be like acting as if it's a quote unquote Super Bowl. I get people wanting to win, and you absolutely do want to win this game, but there is still so much football to be played. There's so much that can happen in the context of the entire season that I wouldn't want to kind of get sucked into the emotion of this 1 week and put it's such an emotional high on this stuff where if you do come out of this with a loss, especially on the Bills end, I mean, that could completely tank a season because you just put so much emotional weight into it that you don't know how to recover after such a demoralizing loss. If you can get out of this with the result that you get and still move on with your life at the end of the day, that could hopefully lead to more success. Where, as I just said, there is still a lot of football to be played. This is only the end of the quarter mark, kind of the regular season. A ton to be done, a ton to be had. The Dolphins have a lot of football to be played, and so do the Bills. So it's a big game in the context of the rivalry. It has its implications that make sense with the division, but at the end of the day, it is not kind of the regular season Super Bowl that it seems like some of the national media, local media, or just fans are putting it up to be at this point in time.
Anthony Nance in here, Miami Dolphins fans. Anthony, we appreciate you hanging out with us. We are certainly friendly to all fans, and that is a cute kid you have in your photo, by the way. Again, for those that are just hopping in, I apologize if it's choppy on my end, working through some internet issues. Luca will pick up the slack where he can. But, I think it's kind of a two-part question. Yes, it's a big game because all off season long it has been, can the teams in the AFC East catch the Bills? And unfortunately, 4 plays into one of those teams' season, it seems like the answer is no, despite the fact that they did technically beat the Bills in a football game week 1. The Jets are not going to catch the Bills with Zach Wilson playing quarterback. And it does come down to the Dolphins. They have been super hot to start the season. And the thing about the Miami Dolphins, Luca, is it's never been a question about top end talent or roster depth. It really has been a question about how healthy can they be, because a lot of their key players, Jalen Ramsey right now, Howard, their cornerback, who dealt with 2 injured groins last season, Bradley Chubb, who has had multiple issues staying on the field dating back to Denver, Jalen Phillips, who really up until this point in the NFL hasn't had the issues, but in college, his career was littered with concussion history. Teron Armstead, one of the best left tackles in the sport, just seems like he has 3 or 4 injuries every given week on the injury report. This is a team that, if they're fully formed, can punch with anybody. And that's really what the Bills are getting this week. So I think we have to be careful to, one, not lose sight of the fact that this is a week 4 game. It's going to be the first week of October. And as Bills fans, we don't have to think back too far to look at examples of the last 2 regular seasons. Our Buffalo Bills went to Arrowhead, beat the Chiefs. Both of those games at the time felt like tone-setting wins for the entire season. The season plays out. The Bills are not only a lower seed than the Chiefs going into the playoffs, but the Chiefs end up making it further in the playoffs than the Bills. So I think we have to keep the context in mind of, yes, it feels huge, but win or lose on Sunday, it still is just chapter 4 of a 17-chapter regular season. And there's going to be so much that happens after this game that determines the fate of both of these teams. And so much about these teams is what kind of form are they in come January. Yes, we want bragging rights now. Yes, we won't see them again till week 18. I get all that. But I want to warn everybody, try not to jump into the trap of making absolute statements, win or lose after this game, Luca.
Yeah, I love you bringing up the Kansas City point and kind of what that felt like for the Bills last year and the year before and stuff like that. It's something that it feels like it's an excuse or just something that you always want to remember when you need to, but you need to almost make sure you regularly remind yourself when you find yourself in another game that feels at a certain level for another team and or us ourselves in a new season. And it's the context of a season plays itself out over a long period of time. And you have these early kind of tone setting games that, yes, can propel you to great heights like a 1 seed in the conference. But at the same time, you still have to get the job done through the next 3 quarters of the season. And that's a lot of football to be played. There's a lot of time for injuries to unfortunately stack up, a lot of time for anything else that could possibly happen. I mean, the Bills, of course, learned that the very, very hard way last season themselves, where things even outside of your normal injury circumstances just seemingly stacked up against them. And it made it more and more difficult as the weeks went and gone. So it's just one of those things where you need to have a healthy reminder of yourself, not kind of talk yourself into, oh, this game doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Like I just said, if Miami wins, they essentially have a 2.5 game lead on the Bills at that point in time with a win. And then you're not seeing them until week 18 when stuff could already be done and dusted at that point in time. That in mind, it's still not everything. And it's just one of those things you have to constantly just have that in the back of your mind and just fully understand that this is week 4. This is not week 16. There is so much to be played. And the Bills have been on the positive side of those kinds of wins early on in the season. And it just hasn't worked out in the way that we thought they did. I mean, you can listen to a podcast, Josh, that you and I recorded after that Kansas City game last year, where we literally, if you play it back, I mean, I would say I thought 60% of the chance we were going to be the 1 seed, and you were probably 55% thinking we were going to be the 1 seed. And boy, did that season not progress the way we thought it would at that point in time. That's just kind of what happens with an NFL season, and it is what it is. It's not to take anything against this game. It's not to take anything against the Dolphins and not treat them seriously. You absolutely need to be hyped up for this game because it's the best game of the weekend, to be quite honest. But it is still just one game. It is early in the season, and there's a lot going on.
Let's talk about this Dolphins offense because they are electric. I think they have one of, if not the best play caller in the sport. That's how highly I think of Mike McDaniel. There was some stats put out from Next Gen Stats last season. When you look at things like scheming open, wide open receivers, it was an article I read on trying to take the quarterback out of the equation and still evaluating how good the offensive coordinator is. Mike McDaniel ranked at or near the top in every metric they tracked. Ken Dorsey was very good in that, by the way. I think he gets kind of a bad rap in this area because he's not Kyle Shanahan. He's not Sean McVay. Ken Dorsey is a very good play caller. But Tua is electric. When he's healthy, he is a handful. I think he's finally starting to enter that conversation of, okay, Patrick Mahomes is here. The next tier are guys like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts. And is Tua in that tier now, or is he approaching that tier? I think that's the conversation we're having. And then Luka, that offense, it's speed for days. Tyreek Hill, Waddle. They have the rookie back A-Chain who came in last week and exploded on the scene against the Broncos. And then we all know how good Raheem Mostert is and what they're doing schematically with the pre-snap motion, getting guys like Hill and Waddle full speed at the snap of the ball is just making it so tricky for defenses to counter what they're doing that I don't know that there is a great solution for what to do. I do have some ideas for what, one, I expect the Bills to do to counter this offense, and two, maybe ways you can find a way to slow it down. But coming off of a week where they put 70 points up, we are certainly going to give them their flowers. Just surface level, Luka, how scary is this offense?
I mean, it's terrifying. Like I want anyone listening to this right now to understand even something as small as literally kind of A-Chan. Look, I love saying A-Chain and I want that to be it, but he did technically come out and Miami PR put out it's A-Chan.
That's just his opinion.
It's one of the most disappointing takes of the week, to be quite honest, because A-Chain, you could do so much with that. But I want to point this out. I love A-Chan, by the way. I was a big fan of him kind of as one of those little guys that really could be something fun in the right place. He's clearly has found that right place. A-Chan is the fastest player on that offense. He has a recorded 100-meter time of 10.14 seconds. Tyreek Hill's fastest 100-meter time is 10.19 seconds. And actually, he gets faster in the 200-meter where he clocked a 20.2 second. He is the fastest player in the league based on 100-meter times, Josh. It's scary because we've already seen what Tyreek Hill has been able to do in this league for all this time. And now you have a guy who has clocked faster times also on the same offense. Oh, by the way, Jalen Waddle can run a measly 10.9, I believe, 100-meter, and everyone else can fly themselves like Mostert and whatnot. They are quite literally the fastest offense we have ever seen, I feel like, in this league at this point in time because it's everywhere. And it would be foolish to say you're not scared of it or terrified of it. The thing that you just have to hope for is that they either have an off day, of course, and or you're able to disrupt things enough from the head of the snake, aka Tua, that it just throws the offense off balance and they're not able to kind of accomplish everything they want because they are quite literally the fastest ball to get rolling. And once it gets its momentum to get rolling, it is the fastest ball down the hill. It will never stop. And unfortunately for the Denver Broncos, yes, they were bad, but they learned a very, very, very hard lesson on just how good this offense could be last week. I don't ever expect them to put up 70 points ever again. I don't want to eat those words, of course, and I think they absolutely could do it again. But they are the sky is the absolute. There is no limit to this offense. It is just unbelievable for the Dolphins, and at full health, at full run, there is. I cannot remember ever watching anything quite like it, where they are just an unlimited disposable of weapons at their hands, and Mike McDaniel has something special if it can all stay throughout this. And it's the one knock I will say is, can this sustain into December? We're not talking about a December game right now, which is what makes it even worse, but we will see what it does throughout the entire season. But right now, it is the most scary thing I have ever seen on an NFL football field.
Maybe since the 99 St. Louis Rams greatest show on turf, which was Kurt Warner just blasting onto the scene. You had Isaac Bruce, you had Torrey Holt, you had Oz Hakeem, who was an absolute lightning bolt in the slot. You obviously had Marshall Faulk, who's a Hall of Fame running back, one of the best running backs of his era. Speed everywhere. And Warner, similar to Tua, was a precision passer that knew how to hit guys in stride to where they could keep their full momentum going. That's what we're dealing with here. And I want to give you a couple of nuggets here on this offense, Luka, because I still think there's people out there, particularly in Bills fandom, that aren't buying into Tua. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest guy. And right now, one of the stats out there that's floating around is 80% of his throws are going to his first read. And that just in a lot of people's head are thinking, oh, well, he's a product of Mike McDaniel, who's this great offensive play designer. That could be true. But here's the issue. Tua and Mike McDaniel are a package deal. McDaniel not going anywhere. So if you're hesitant to give Tua any credit because Mike McDaniel's there, it really doesn't matter. 70 points is 70 points. And they are staying together for the long haul, assuming Tua can stay healthy, which I can say confidently Luka and I are both hoping for. We certainly don't wish for him to have the injuries that we saw last year. And with the fact that 80% of his throws are going to that first read, he has been sacked one time in 3 games. And that's where I want to start off with my first key in this game, Luka, because I want to make a point about the Dolphins running game with this point also. He gets rid of the ball very quickly, but they also have one of the longest yards per completions in the sport. So they're getting rid of it quickly, but they're getting rid of it effectively. Now, what does that mean for the Bills? When you look at the Dolphins, they lead the league in rushing. Yards per carry and total yards. That might surprise some folks with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua, but they are an explosive running game. My first key to this game is on the Bills' defensive line that I think is better player for player than the Dolphins' offensive line. I don't care about sacks this week. I don't care if the Bills get Tua to the ground one stinking time in this game because of how fast he gets the ball to the ground. My key for the Bills' defensive line this week, Luka, is twofold. One, your job is to stop the run. I think we'll see a lot of Shaq Lawson this week. I think Poona Ford, who was a healthy scratch last week, has a real good opportunity to be up this week. I think the defensive line has to stay in their lanes, stay in their gaps, and they are the first line of defense against the run, because what you don't want against an offense that gets the ball out like this is having guys like Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, and Leonard Floyd so focused on getting into the backfield, they abandon their run lanes. And someone like Raheem Mostert, who's faster than anybody on the Bills defense, takes what should have been a 2-yard loss and turns it into a 70-yard gain. If you can take away or at least slow down their running lanes with your front four, easier said than done, then you have your back 7 who can focus on the passing lanes. The next thing I'll say, Luka, before I kick it over to you is, again, don't care about pass rush. Get your hands up. Tua, for all the compliments, is a smaller guy, and the Bills have a lot of length on their defensive line. I want to see hands up if you're not just blowing past your guy at the snap of the whistle, hands up. Confuse him, get him off of his first read any way you can. So for me, defensive line success this, Luka, has absolutely nothing to do with success with sacks, and it's all about the things I just mentioned: hands up and stopping the run.
Well, it's funny you bring up this point, like it's kind of it might be shocking to some. What immediately my mind goes to, and I really didn't know you were going to bring this up until right before we were going live, to be quite honest, just to be transparent with everyone. And it's funny because as soon as you started talking through it, one thing just popped in my mind, Josh, was the template and kind of the formula of what you're describing was already something we watched go down in 60 minutes last December against Miami. And early on, there seemed to be this lack of understanding and focus on stopping the run, and they were shredding, absolutely gashing up the Bills defense left and right, primarily to their right, our left, a lot. And they were running at will. They were going up. It was honestly borderline embarrassing and uncomfortable to watch as a Bills fan, where you just felt like you were never going to get a key stop. You were never going to be able to make things happen. And it all of a sudden it kind of clicked where they really overemphasized focusing on the run D, making sure that they could no longer do something like that, which also has been kind of the key to their success this season. They have ran it more than any other team other than, I think there's one team out there that's run it more per average. But regardless, they've ran it over 30 times a game this season compared to last year where they only ran it, I believe, 21 times a game or something like that. It's a noticeable gap where there is a commitment to this, and they clearly find success by establishing that, making sure that run game can actually tick. And then Tua can read everything comfortably and hit that first read all the time. And when your first read is even Tyreek Hill, who's not running the route that he needs to be and hitting you for 55 yards and a touchdown, something that literally happened last week against Denver. If you haven't seen that video, it's quite hilarious. Tyreek did not run the route he was supposed to. Tua had no idea what route he was running, but that was also why all of a sudden Tyreek Hill was open with 15 yards of cushion everywhere around him and was able to run free for a score. When you have that ability to just hit that first read every time, it's an easy day at the office. And I think that is all stemmed, like you're saying, in the run game. If they are consistently committed to that and they're able to be successful there, it puts your defense in a bind. So you just need that front four that I'm kind of with you. I don't know if I'm like as emphatic about it, but I definitely feel like this defensive line should absolutely be able to hold their own in the run game against this offensive line for where it's at, especially when you got like a guy like Jackson at right tackle right now for them that hasn't really been that great and overly impressive. If you're able to kind of have your best run defender on top of it over him and then just contain and make sure you're hitting your run fits exactly where you need to be, and you have linebackers like Milano and Bernard, of course, who are hitting their stride, you could find a lot of success holding up that run and then just disrupting Tua enough where he's not able to hit that first read 80% of the times, where he's not comfortable seeing what he actually is seeing. And then that 70 point, that 35 points that you think they should be able to get turns into a hard-earned 24, 27 points. And the Bills hopefully can be able to keep up with that kind of offensive production because, I mean, the Bills are not going to put up 70 points. I mean, I would love to think that, but it's not going to happen. But I also believe that this defense, as you're saying, if they focus on the run, should be able to contain them enough to make things happen and kind of limit the big plays on the ground as well in the air by focusing on that and letting the coverage do their job in those pass fits.
Mike Lackey on Facebook saying, what's going on, guys? What's up, Mike? What's going on? Anthony and Roy and Jay, we see you all in chat. We appreciate you all hanging out. Even if you're someone like Anthony who's rooting for Miami, we appreciate that. Yeah, I think stopping the run, that was one thing that really stood out last season in the December matchup, Luka, was Mike McDaniel seemed to abandon the run for no good reason, and it shut down a couple of drives. And that's where I want to go with point number 2. And this is going to be one that I feel like can be used every week in an NFL game. But I think this week in particular, there's some stats that bear this out, especially when you're talking about two teams that have very explosive offensive. In Miami's case, the best offense we've seen in a while in the sport. And it's going to come down to the red zone for me. And I know, again, obvious. Oh, you want to score touchdowns instead of field goals. I get it. But let's look back to the game last year in December when Tua was healthy, Josh Allen was healthy, and the Bills beat the Dolphins 32-29. The difference in that game really was the fact that Miami only scored 1 touchdown in 3 trips to the red zone. You remember Trent Sherfield dropped the ball in the end zone. There were several times when it felt like Mike McDaniel abandoned the run when he could have just punched it in. And the Bills end up winning that game by 3 points. Well, that was a one-off game, but let's dive into some stats that might actually tell the story a little bit closer. Red zone defense last year. The reason why I'm using last year and not this year, even though it is a defensive scheme change for Miami under Vic Fangio, is I just am a bigger fan of sample size. So we have to understand that it is last year. The Bills were the second best red zone defense last year in the entire sport, only giving up touchdowns on 45% of the trips. Miami, on the other hand, was the 24th best, so 9th worst in the sport. 60% of the trips on defense resulted in touchdowns. Looking at the other side of the ball, which is probably even more telling, the Bills and Dolphins, for as great as their offenses were last year, were on the bottom end of the top 10 in red zone touchdown percentage. The Bills were at 9, 60% of their drives resulted in touchdowns. The Dolphins were right below the Bills at 10, 59.26 drives resulted in touchdowns. I say that because this is one of those games where I think whether you're Mike McDaniel or you're Sean McDermott, you push the envelope. 4th and 3, 4th and 4. We know Jason Sanders and Tyler Bass are excellent field goal kickers. Stay on the sidelines, guys. 3 doesn't really help us out in this game. push the envelope, go for fourth down. We have explosive offenses. I think that's going to be the case. And if one of these teams, Luka, in the first half starts kicking field goals in the red zone, I want all of you to keep that in the back of your mind that this is a very bad thing for that team, despite the fact that they're piling up points.
Yeah, this is a push the envelope game. It's one where you need to be aggressive. You have to absolutely kind of keep your foot on the gas as much as you can. And as long as it's fourth and manageable, if it's your 4th and 3 or shorter, you need to continue to trust in your offense to continue to move the ball and hopefully get it in that last 10 yards, also known as the end zone. Really funny face that your face just froze on. Sorry.
Oh, is it frozen right now?
It was pretty. Sorry.
I'm glad I'm entertaining you over here. In this
Froze had a really good time.
awful situation.
Anyways, so yeah, you need to. This is a foot on the gas kind of game, and it's one of those games too, by the way, that you hope your punter never comes out. You, like you're saying, short chip shot field goals should not be occurring, hopefully, and like it's one of those games in betting terms, by the way, Josh, that I love the over, because when your offenses are continuing to be on the field, yes, you think that's points, but even if they don't convert on fourth down, it's not a field position game anymore. There might be short field opportunities for either side, and I think that will be this game. If you're anywhere near midfield with a 4th and short, if you're, of course, as soon as you cross the 50, you should probably be going for everything possible, because you know every point is so valuable, but not in the context of field goals, in the context of touchdowns. You need to be able to get those big chunk points that you get with a touchdown, because you know the other side, no matter which side you're on as a fan, the other side can put up points at will if needed, or do whatever's needed, because you have Superman and Josh Allen on one side, and then you have the fastest team in the history of the NFL on the other. Either side can do anything at any point in time. You need to push the envelope. You need to actually force the ball into the end zone as much as possible. And that is kind of that first point, or the second point technically that you're bringing up, is the first time where, if you're looking at this game from a neutral perspective, you may start to lean a little bit in the Bills' favor, just because of something in sample size like you put out there, where they are a very impressive red zone defense compared to the Dolphins, who haven't yet proved it enough to make us feel like they're going to be able to hold it on their own themselves.
Let's talk about the Bills offense, because all offseason the theme was, we know Allen's excellent, we know Diggs is excellent, but what else do you got after those two? Because last year they had a pretty average traditional running game. A lot of their running yards were inflated by Josh Allen runs. And after Stephon Diggs, it was a hodgepodge of, okay, Gabe Davis can get deep. Some weeks he has 110 yards on 3 catches. Some weeks he goes 1 catch for 13. And, Dawson Knox was there as a red zone weapon, but not a consistent weapon. And after that, it was just Isaiah McKenzie, John Brown, wherever they fit in, a little Khalil Shakir here, a little Cole Beasley there, but nothing that scares you. We're only 3 games into this season, Luka, but I will tell you, looking at the stat sheet, it does feel a lot like last year. And that includes Dalton Kincaid, who a lot of us had high hopes for. He only has 11 receptions and 12 targets, and they're all short targets. He is averaging 6.5 yards per catch, 72 yards on the season. The one caveat to everything I'm saying is the Bills are getting a lot more explosive traditional runs out of their offense this year with James Cook. He is having an excellent season, among the league leaders in rushing, averaging 6.1 yards per carry, 267 yards in 3 games. But Luka, is it enough? And do you expect this is the week that either A, we see Dalton Kincaid explode onto the scene, or B, one of these guys that we've seen have big games in spurts, Dawson Knox, Gabe Davis, maybe it's a random Deontay Hardy game. I think they're going to need somebody other than Diggs to keep pace with the Dolphins.
I don't know if I'm going to go into the camp of Dalton Kincaid, only because I do feel like the Dolphins have a defense that actually is capable of keeping with that big wide receiver, in Dalton Kincaid and a Dawson Knox. I think they have a defense that fits well for it. So your safety blanket kind of offense that Dalton Kincaid seems to be finding his role in early, Javon Holland should be able to eat that stuff kind of up. He's an incredibly impressive safety in his own right, both in coverage and up in the box. He can do a lot of different things. So I'm not necessarily as comfortable thinking that Dalton Kincaid, but yes, you need someone else to step up. And actually, to me, this is kind of the game where Gabe Davis has a little bit of confidence going. I would like to see Deontay Hardy, of course, doing it. And then never underestimate the revenge game factor that some people like to silly, like myself in fantasy or whatever, where you bet the revenge game is going to give this player some sort of boost. Trent Sherfield got a little bit of looks last game. Maybe there's something in there for him to kind of step up a little bit more against a team he felt like he couldn't crack the offense, even though he had impressive outings in his own right with Miami. And he can step up this week against them and be that kind of secondary target for the Bills offense, because you probably will need to do something outside of Diggs, being that the Dolphins defense, you would think, are going to do a pretty decent job in kind of bracketing and trying their best to eliminate. So you need to go elsewhere. Like I said, I don't know about Kincaid as much, but I could definitely see an individual like Trent Sherfield, Gabe Davis, other receiver options really stepping up to the plate and making things happen in their own right.
Where are you at on James Cook right now? It's only been 3 games. It hasn't been 3 great defenses. He didn't do much in the Jets game, but he did run all over the Raiders and then followed up with a very nice game against Washington. Do you think this is a sustainable formula for the Bills where they can really use a traditional running game? We've seen more Josh Allen under center. It opens up play action. And then James Cook is becoming maybe the 3rd or 4th most important player on this offense as we're seeing the season play out. Or do you think it's just a fact of maybe 2 of his best games of the season already happened and his stats are a little inflated based on where they'll probably wind up?
Oh, I don't think his stats are inflated. I think James Cook's role and importance to this offense is very, very, very key, especially I'll call it in between the 20s. I think James Cook is kind of that forgotten option when it comes to the defensive perspective here. I'm not talking about Bills fans or us, as football fans in general. I'm talking about a defensive coordinator sitting there game planning for the Bills. There's so much emphasis on Josh Allen, on Stephon Diggs in the passing game. You have your Dawson Knox Kincaid, of course, they drafted first round. So there's a lot of things that you can understand a defensive coach in the week of game planning to circle in the passing game. And then there's just James Cook, who has been doing a very good job with the opportunities he's had in between the 20s of still moving the sticks and still making chunk plays happen, where his success can absolutely come this game if they try to just overemphasize the passing game too much. I think he's already at a point in his career where he can excel in the opportunities given to him, and he's getting a lot of chances with this offense right now. And he also, in a weird way, you would see this more with bigger backs, I feel like, in the past, Josh, but it feels like once he gets going, he really can actually pick up more and more yards as the game progresses, because it just feels like the defense is no longer willing to defend the run, and they just want to make sure those chunk plays are no longer there. And then you let someone with the athletic skill set like James Cook kind of be able to hit a hole or at least get around the edge on you. He can absolutely gash you up in his own right. So you've seen a lot of his bigger runs come at the end of the game to almost seal it in a way. And I don't think that's kind of a fluke or just kind of the other team giving up. I think there's a reason for that. And it's just finally the defense concedes that kind of aspect of their game plan, and they're willing to give that up because they just cannot allow Josh Allen to hit them over top anymore and hit these tight windows that he seems to be doing the past couple of weeks. And you just got to pick your poison. And if you're willing to live in the life of giving up stuff to James Cook, he can still absolutely kill you. And I do believe that is a trend we will see as the season continues to progress.
And I like they've been using him out of the backfield too. All right, Luke, let's get to the news of the day. Jordan Poyer is going to miss this game. I think a lot of us expected, much like last week, he missed practice. He'd probably practice on Friday and be good to go. But Sean McDermott already ruled him out, which, was concerning, kind of a gut punch to a lot of us that felt like this was an all hands on deck situation. And one thing that maybe gave you hope against this Dolphins offense was the Poyer Hyde tandem that the Bills didn't have in any of the 3 matchups last season against the Dolphins, excuse me. But I think when you think about where this team's going, where this team plans to be going in January, and the greater good of this season, Jordan Poyer is a guy that played through a lot of injuries last season in 2022 to the point where he wasn't even cleared to fly to Kansas City. He had to rent a car to drive to Kansas City. And I feel like that never really allowed him to get healthy, and we never saw that best version of himself on the field. And really, his worst game was that Cincinnati game. He was out of position multiple times in the playoffs. And for it being week 4, I'm all in favor of the Bills shutting him down. I've seen some folks out there. I know Thigh Doctor, who works for Buffalo Fanatics, has suggested maybe he needs to have a cleanup surgery that would put him on the sidelines anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. But could ultimately make him a much better player come into the season. So let's start off with the loss of Jordan Poyer, Luka. I don't think it's any secret. I don't think he's had a real good season to date. He has looked slow. He's looked a little sloppy in tackling. And I made a comment today to a mutual friend that there's a part of me that was a little relieved that he had a knee injury, because the other option is like he's hitting that age wall, and that's just a tough conversation to have. And I don't want to face that conversation. So I don't think that this is a crisis based on the Jordan Poyer we've seen so far in 2023. I do worry about some of the continuity with him and Hyde and what that allows the Bills to do pre and post snap. But in general, what kind of form do you think the Bills are in without 21?
I think it's going to affect communication at times. I mean, that's just the nature of it. It's an interesting predicament here, because I'm kind of with you in the sense of, or the point of, where it's like, I was almost in a weird way relieved that a knee injury seemed to come out of this, and the poor performances we were seeing out of him might be due to something like that. And it would explain why his angles and just his inability to get to the tackle like he had been in years past was there. And it's a clear and concise explanation for that. And that's great, because yes, we do not want to live in that world where we need to have the conversation of, did we just pay this guy who all of a sudden hit the wall, unfortunately, and now what do we do with this? It will be interesting to see with the communication and everything, now that a Taylor Rapp or DeMar Hamlin or whatever they do with that. Obviously, we assume it's going to be Taylor Rapp primarily taking that role, of course, but it will be interesting to see what communication looks like there in Taylor Rapp's kind of first go at playing his natural strong safety position. And Taylor Rapp, to me, Josh, is at the safety position, at the strong safety position, almost feels a little bit weirdly like a throwback, like an Adrian Wilson type.
Mm-hmm.
And I am fascinated by that, because going back to when I really did enjoy watching the Cardinals with Adrian Wilson, who is an absolute beast, I wouldn't necessarily have been a fan of him up against an offense like this, because it definitely wouldn't be able to keep up with the speed of it all. But if the communication's there, if everyone can stay in their spots and just understand their jobs at hand, and you still have your all-pro guy, Micah Hyde, who's having an exceptional start to his own season right now, does their job, I don't feel as bad, because maybe there's something better there athletically in Taylor Rapp now than a 65% Jordan Poyer that we've seen the first few weeks. And that now I can kind of justify that in my head and be like, okay, I am okay with this. This might actually be okay. And unfortunately, yes, you always want Jordan Poyer out there, but maybe this could be, I'm not going to call it beneficial, but the right move, because you want to make sure your guys are 100% when out there on the defense due to that speed that I mentioned previously.
When the Bills signed Taylor Rapp, we were excited because this was a great insurance policy for a team that had two 30-plus-year-old safeties, both coming off of different versions of a very injury-plagued year. And last season, we saw that safety depth really depleted, where guys like Dean Marlowe and Jaquan Johnson were playing. Jaquan, I don't know, I said Jaquan, were playing in the playoffs. And that's just not ideal at all. And I think Taylor Rapp was a guy that we felt like could get us through a stretch of games if we had to lose Hyde or Poyer. I don't know that any of us were super excited about cashing in that insurance policy in week 4, but I think there's a multi-layered conversation here, because Taylor Rapp is on a 1-year deal. He's a younger player. And if he comes in and performs well, and look, he's a starting caliber safety, but Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde have been all pro level safeties. But the level of play we've seen from Jordan Poyer in the tiny sample size of 3 games this season has not been that all pro level. He has looked out of place and slow at times. If Taylor Rapp comes in, I think it's very reasonable to expect that he can match or even exceed what we've seen from Poyer so far this season. And this actually gives the Bills, if Poyer is out for an extended period of time, maybe a month or so, a runway to evaluate Taylor Rapp with their starters in very important games, because they're going to have a decision this offseason to make. They can easily get out of Micah Hyde's contract. I believe he's an unrestricted free agent. Jordan Poyer is on a multi-year deal, but with a very easy out clause after this year. And with Taylor Rapp's contract running out, they might decide, after getting an extended look at him, that they'd rather go with the younger guy. So this is a good opportunity for Taylor Rapp. The other thing, and this is where the concerning piece of it comes in, is I feel like one thing the Bills could do that a lot of teams can't do is post-snap confusion. Hyde and Poyer have played together so much that even if they're not the best versions of themselves, which Hyde is right now playing excellent football, Poyer not as much. I think that they still have the ability. I know where you're going to be. You know where I'm going to be. We can fake this pre-snap, and then at post-snap, boom, we're in cover 2. We're not in cover 3 anymore. And just creating a little bit of hesitation on Tua's part that can maybe either slow down his first read or get him off of his first read. Well, that's out now because this will be the first game that Micah Hyde and Taylor Rapp have started together. But in general, I don't think that this is going to be an athletic decline. And I do think that what we've seen out of Poyer this year, there's a chance that Taylor Rapp can actually offer some benefits that Jordan Poyer just has not been able to offer while he gets healthy. But I guess the larger question here is, Luka, is Taylor Rapp somebody, when you look at this defense now, we talked about all offseason, Hyde and Poyer back together. Now that one of that's gone, do you start getting PTSD to last season where you're just like, oh God, here we go again? Or do you feel like, okay, this is what we brought in Taylor Rapp for. Everything's probably going to be okay.
No, the latter. This is that, hey, this isn't the same old thing going back at it. This isn't trying to do something different with the same parts. We have a different part in place for this exact moment and reason. As you mentioned, unfortunately, we had to crack this open and kind of break the glass week 4, not week 14 or whenever it may have happened, if it had happened at all. But that said, it's like, no, this is why you did what you did with Taylor Rapp. This is a perfect opportunity, as you mentioned, to evaluate why you did this move. If the same result happens, this is going to sound weird as hell, Josh. If the same thing happens, I'm almost going to be more okay with it only because they tried to do something different. If they didn't try to do something different, I would be furious. I would be wanting to throw my remote at the TV level of anger in my living room watching that game. It's like, no, they did something different. They're trying to accomplish what they dealt with last year in a different way, with hopefully a higher end player in Taylor Rapp filling that hole. And I actually, to that regard, think that there was probably an effort in that so that he could potentially be the succession plan. And that in mind, Josh, I do wonder if you still will see some of that pre-snap disguising happen because they want to trust Taylor Rapp in those abilities. They want to hopefully have Hyde and Rapp and Trey White and Benford and your actual secondary as a whole trust each other, even though it isn't Poyer anymore in there. There's still another guy that the defensive coordinator trusts that hopefully they can then trust and continue to do what they are successful at with those pre-snap disguises and doing whatever it is that they already did when Poe was in there at his high end. So I actually don't necessarily even kind of find myself in the same mindset where the worry is that they won't do that anymore because Poyer's not there. I'm not with you on that point. I think there is a chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think there is a chance, just due to kind of the investment they've made in bringing in a Taylor Rapp kind of player, that they may continue to do things like that just to see if it can actually work out. Because if you're truly wanting to give him a test run, Josh, if you're truly wanting to understand the player you have, you cannot hold them back. You cannot restrict what they do in what you want them to eventually do. You want to see what they're fully capable of. And here's your opportunity at hand, Sean McDermott. Make it happen.
So going back to last season, which both of these players, Jordan Poyer and Taylor Rapp, had a large sample size of playing. I'm going to read off some PFF grades for you all. And now, look, we understand PFF is just one metric. It doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. In a lot of ways, it's not. But at least as a neutral opinion of both of these players, going back to last season, Taylor Rapp had a very similar grade to Jordan Poyer. Taylor Rapp was 76.2 overall. Jordan Poyer was 75.4. So a slight edge to Taylor Rapp. Coverage grade also very similar. Taylor Rapp 76.2. Jordan Poyer, I'm sorry, 72.9. Jordan Poyer 76.2. Now, Jordan Poyer's played all 3 games this season, and his grades, PFF wise, have been horrendous. 55.6 overall, 58.7 coverage. So I think, at least based on PFF, there is a school of thought that this doesn't have to be a downgrade and it could be an upgrade while also getting Jordan Poyer back to full health. Let's talk about another JP who's not going to be in this game. This one's for the Miami Dolphins side of things. as it was announced today that Jalen Phillips, their outstanding young pass rusher who played at college with Greg Rousseau at Miami, is going to miss this game. He missed week 2 also against the New England Patriots. He is a very high-end player. I feel like every time the Bills play the Dolphins, he pops to me on almost every single snap. Even if he doesn't make a play, you just get obsessed watching his athletic ability, his length. He just has such a good feel for the game. And, he's a guy that really struggled with concussions in college. But this is really the first time in the NFL he's had trouble staying on the field. What do you think about the loss of Jalen Phillips, Luka? Because I will tell you, leading into this matchup, thinking about where I was really concerned, I started thinking about, okay, the Bills' offensive line has been better. They struggled week 1 mightily. They did well against Max Crosby. I thought they passed the test last week against Washington, who just did not impress. But man, you start talking about Christian Wilkins, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips. This is a different handful against a team that's probably going to get close to 30 points, maybe more, and the offense has to be really good for the Bills. I was getting nervous. Now Phillips is out. That is huge because I do not think Bradley Chubb is a great player. I think he's a pretty good player. Christian Wilkins is a lot better than that. But to me, that's a very impactful loss. To me, that's probably right up there with the Bills missing Von Miller, with what I think Von Miller is at this stage of his career. That's how highly I think of Phillips, and maybe Von Miller not being at his peak at this point. What do you think about the loss of Jalen Phillips?
I think it's a massive one. I think the thing you can't, I'm with you 100%, by the way, on he pops against the Bills all the time. And the key point about that is when you think back to the playoff game, when it was a lot closer than it really should have been, and it's really what worries a lot of people. Yeah.
What's up,
Jalen Phillips was kind of that guy who really started flipping the game on its own head when it comes to the Miami defense taking over the Bills offense. He had 9 total tackle involvements. He had half a sack, although I believe and if I remember, he was the one that basically created that sack opportunity in its own right, where him and Elijah Campbell ended up meeting at the quarterback together, and had 2 other tackles for loss as well. He was single-handedly starting to destroy that game and really take over with him, and then Wilkins, of course, inside doing a little bit of the dirty work himself. So Jalen Phillips really is a handful for the Bills offensive line last year, and has been since he's been a Dolphin. And for him to be out, I believe I even saw it here, your Spencer Browns are going to be very, very happy that he's not there, because I'm with you. I think there is a drop off between him and Bradley Chubb. And Van Ginkel, who has apparently had a very good start to a season. I know he's popped and he's made some plays. I cannot believe to see that he was the 8th ranked edge defender on PFF currently right now. Now, I don't know what the sample size is with that. Obviously, we're just going to say in the past 3 games, it's still a very impressive start, but Van Ginkel is not Jalen Phillips. Like, he's just not. And it will be interesting to see him now step up opposite of Chubb to see what they can do in the pass rush, as well as defend the edge with the run game, because the Bills have shown not only obviously is the pass game very important, but they actually do have an edge run game with the, as I keep calling it, the Bruce Arians halfback delay, which is seemingly taking the NFL by storm again, because I've seen it in numerous other games as well. This whole I don't even know what the way sprint out the halfback delay, I guess is what you'd call it, because essentially it's the quarterback sprinting to the edge to then go to the running back for them to just be able to choose the edge or inside tackle lane, whatever is there on the delay run. That is very important for your edge defenders to be there for those moments. And the Bills have done it at least 2 to 3 times every week. So that is obviously a staple that the Bills like to run in the offense. You have the pass game in its own right, and your best edge defender in our eyes, Jalen Phillips, is not there for those moments. So that is a big, big thing for them. And now your Christian Wilkins, your Bradley Chubb, and your Van Ginkels are going to have to really step up. Wilkins will do his own thing. I'm very confident in that. He will. Wilkins versus Torrance, Josh, is going to be one that I have my eyes on very closely. That will be a true first big test, and someone that's been in the pain in the butt for the Bills now coming up against a new guy on our offensive line to see how he handles that. And then, we talk about it. No more Jalen Phillips. So hopefully Spencer Brown can handle Van Ginkel himself.
You mentioned Jalen Phillips is a handful. Josh Allen might say that Christian Wilkins also is a handful.
God.
Yeah, I mean, in certain ways,
Hey, the
Christian
joke came
Wilkins
through your internet. There you go.
I'm so
Be
happy.
happy
I
about
was
that.
sitting on that one for like 3 minutes. Like, please don't mess up internet because Christian Wilkins just likes to, you know what he likes to do. All right, everybody, we are getting ready to make our predictions, but we want to hear from you. You're sitting in chat. Let us know who you think wins this game, what the final score is going to be. Luke and I are both 2-1 on the season. We have both picked the Bills to win every week. We did last week, yes, and we both picked the Bills to win every week. They lost the Jets game. We are sitting here and get some scores in chat. We'll put them up on screen. But Luka, massive battle coming up in the AFC East at Highmark Stadium. The 3-0 Miami Dolphins, fresh off of putting 70 points on Sean Payton's Denver Broncos, come to Buffalo to take on our 2-1 Buffalo Bills. How's this game going to go down? The Miami Dolphins are either 3-point favorites or 2.5-point favorites, depending on the book you look at. Honestly, Luka, real quick, were you surprised by that spread?
I don't know if you said the Bills were favored. I think you did. But anyways,
Bills are favored. If I didn't say that, Bills are 3-point favorites. Were you surprised by the spread?
I was surprised, but let me also say this. If the Monday night disaster doesn't happen and Miami doesn't put up 70 points, I'm pretty sure this would have been a 6.5-point spread game. So because I keep that in mind and then watching the money kind of go in where it has gone, I'm not overly surprised. The money is primarily on the Bills in some books. And then it's also on Miami in other books. It's held true. And it does kind of feel like a line that it's really weird. It's a really, really, really weird line, but it makes sense because if you really try to look at it in a neutral way, it's like, okay, I can understand how they got to it there. It's just, they didn't overreact to 70 points. They didn't overreact to the Bills basically shutting out effectively the Commanders. And then they're kind of just reacting to Josh Allen may still have that kind of psycho Josh in him that we saw week 1. And there's another test coming up here after having a couple, we'll call them cupcakes of the NFL on his dock in between there. So three feels right. Three feels like the line to me for the Bills to be favorited.
All right. How do you see it going down?
So it's funny, every week we do this, Josh. I actually make sure I open up the notes I made, the nice, beautiful detailed notes of our season prediction podcast, where I actually wrote things down like it basically was a news article. Just because I don't know why I do that. It's not like it is shown to anyone. But the funniest part is the two notes I had was the Dolphins early in the season can absolutely go punch for punch on anyone and take the top off of them. And I could absolutely see them coming into this full momentum. Well, that sure came true. And then the other note I had is the defensive line has a history of absolutely blowing the Bills up and taking over games, even if the Bills go up early, and helps the Dolphins find their way getting back into the game. Jalen Phillips note. And that is an interesting one. I wrote down Jalen Phillips as kind of the key guy to watch out for when I was thinking about this game back in August. And it's almost skewed my decision to basically reverse the scoreline that I had written down. And I had gone with Miami to win that game, by the way, in our prediction show, 31-28. I like the Bills to win this game 33-30. I think it's just going to be that way. I think it's going to be a very close game. It could be, of course, with that amount of points, last team with the ball wins kind of deal. But overall, I think the Jalen Phillips loss is a massive one that I think some are maybe overlooking a little bit. And he really is kind of that game wrecker when it comes to playing against the Bills. And that could be the overwhelmingly highlighted thing that they're missing when it comes to the Bills, and maybe allows Josh Allen to make one or two more splash plays than he's had in the past and get them over the line. And I will say I'm not exactly comfortable at it. It's far from a lock for me. I am not betting this game whatsoever, Josh. But yeah, I'm going to say Bills will win this game 33-30, and it will be an absolute gem if you're a football fan.
Carl checked in. Dolphins do not score more than 2 touchdowns. Bills win 31-10. Carl, if that happens, if the Bills hold the Dolphins to 10 points, I'm going to find you. I'm going to DM you, and you're going to come on our post-game show, and you're going to tell us what else you know, because that would be an impressive call, my friend. I do not see it happening that way, but I certainly hope it does. All right. Well, you mentioned our preseason prediction podcast. We both picked the Dolphins to win this game, and we went down the schedule. And I'm just thinking about that. And I'm thinking about, okay, what has happened this year that would change my mind either way? Obviously, we have 3 weeks of data on both of these teams, but has Miami or Buffalo done anything to skew either way? You mentioned the Jalen Phillips injury. There's also been a Jordan Poyer injury. Other than that, both teams are basically the teams we expected. We knew Jalen Ramsey would be out. We knew Von Miller would be out. I think Tua has probably performed better than most of us even thought he would. Even if you're a big Tua fan, he's been excellent. Tyreek Hill looks like he's well on his way to being the offensive player of the year, if it's not Christian McCaffrey. So what does this amount to? I think these are two very even teams. I think these are teams that are both going to make the playoffs. I think this is a division that coming into the season, we thought there could be 3 teams that really are vying for that top spot. The Jets are out of the way now in all of our opinions. And I do think that the Dolphins and the Bills are going to be there fighting together till the end. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm predicting the Miami Dolphins to win this football game 30-27. And I just want you all to hear me say a couple things about that. First of all, I'm not saying the Miami Dolphins are better than the Buffalo Bills. I'm not saying that they're a better football team or that they're going to win the AFC East. All I'm telling you is, in my mind, they're going to win the game on Sunday. It's one win. It happens. It's week 4. Teams lose games. And just the form they're in right now, the Poyer injury does hurt, I think, with some communication issues. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game. But right now, I think the Dolphins are really riding at their ceiling. I still think that the Bills have some work to clean up. I think last week's game against Washington, at the end of the day, looked like a fantastic blowout. But when you look under the hood, it was only 16-0 after the third quarter, and then they piled on late. There's just some things right now with the Bills I want to see more out of. I want to see more out of Dalton Kincaid that I saw Costa mention. I want to see if James Cook can sustain this in a game where we need every yard he gets and not just piling up yards and blowouts. I want to see if Gabe Davis can become a consistent weapon opposite Stephon Diggs. At this point, I'm thinking he probably can. I think that's going to have to be a Dalton Kincaid thing to go into. Where at Miami, there's not the questions. If it's not Tyreek Hill, it's Jalen Waddle. If it's not Jalen Waddle, it's Raheem Mostert. And if it's not Raheem Mostert, it's Devin Achane. I was trying to remind myself, sneeze it through, and I won't say A-chain. So look, this doesn't have to mean that the Dolphins are passing the Bills or that Tua is past Josh Allen. In this prediction, it just means that the Dolphins win a football game on Sunday in a game that they're taking on an opponent they're very even with. There will be a rematch in December. Hopefully for the Bills' sake, that rematch doesn't matter. They already have the AFC East locked up, and I do think there is a very high probability we see a third matchup again this year with the Bills and the Dolphins. So I have the Bills losing 30-27. I can hear you all booing me. And Luka, you point at the camera. So what is on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think the sports books kind of see a result like you, because if anyone's not aware, I like to sprinkle both of our score predictions because it's fun. And also the odds for correct score are pretty ridiculous. But in reference to like my score prediction, Bills 33, Dolphins 30, it is a plus 13,000 odd. For you, it's actually only plus 8,000. It is the third most likely score according to the correct score bets. So just a fun fact, I believe the sports books are thinking that you are in the realm of possible when it comes to your score prediction being Dolphins 30, Bills 27, just for whatever it's worth.
Well, the last time a team from Florida won a game in Buffalo was 30-27 when the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Bills in the 1996 playoffs. That's not true. I'm sure Florida teams have won in Buffalo way more often than that. In fact, I know that the Mark Brunell, David Garrard Jaguars have won here. Yep. I made that stat up completely, but it was the final score of Jim Kelly's last game. So bring that up. I am sorry, Bills fan 1970. I would love to be wrong. I absolutely want to be wrong. I want the Bills to win this game. I absolutely think the Bills can win this game. It is a coin toss game, but I would be disingenuous to all of you sitting in this chair as somebody who has to try to tell you what I think is going to happen week in and week out. If I just sat here and predicted the Bills to go 17-0, there will be losses along the way. Some of them we will not see coming, maybe a lot like week 1 after Zach Wilson came in and they still managed to lose the game. Some of them will just be losses where it's like, hey, these teams are even and the other team got us that day. That's what I'm predicting here. I am not expecting either one of these teams to come out and outclass the other team. And I will say, if it happens, if the Bills come out and win this game 35-14, or the Dolphins come out and win this game 42-24, I will be sitting in this chair on post game telling you all it's one game. If the Bills win by 20 points, it's one game. There's only two things. There's only four things that could happen in this game that would knock me off that spot. Serious injury to Tua, serious injury to Tyreek Hill, serious injury to Stephon Diggs, serious injury to Josh Allen. Other than that, you have two high-scoring offenses, which always means there's blowout potential if one of those offenses has a bad day. And I will be sitting here on the post-game show saying, Team X that won this game, great for them. Hopefully it's the Bills, but we will see this team again, and I will be just as nervous before that game as I was before this game. Luka, any final thoughts on this matchup before we transition into our favorite segment of the week?
No, I'm just excited for this game, to be quite honest. It's the best game of the weekend card. There is a reason for that, and I believe it will live up to the billing. If I take my Bills fandom hat off, I cannot wait. It makes me feel so good and also so upset that this game is at 1:00 because it feels like it can just be our thing where not everyone, unless they have multiple TV sets and or Sunday ticket or live in the area, can enjoy. But also it probably should have been a Sunday night game and not actually what was there. Although that being said, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't go down 4 plays in, Kansas City at New York with Aaron Rodgers, imagine Aaron Rodgers on the field and then Taylor Swift up in the stands. Boy, would that obviously make sense for Sunday Night Football. It sounds like Aaron Rodgers still might be in the stadium if you haven't heard those rumors. But overall, yeah, this is the best game of the weekend by far, and I just cannot wait to enjoy it as a football fan in general.
Maybe in the spirit of trying to impress Taylor Swift, Aaron Rodgers will look at his injury and he'll shake it off.
Oh, my God.
Shake it off. Nope, not happening on the podcast. And of course, the internet doesn't cut out there when I start singing Taylor Swift, because God forbid the internet gods protect me from myself. Luka, have you seen the CBS broadcast map? I don't mean this week, but in general, where it just shows you like, okay, well, the majority of the country is getting Bills Dolphins, but like here in the left corner, you're going to see in Denver, like Colorado, they're getting the Broncos game. You've seen that map before, right?
Yes.
This week, it was hilarious because there was an uncomfortable portion of the country getting Broncos and Bears instead of Bills Dolphins, and not where you'd predict it, like Illinois and Colorado that you can live with, but like a big chunk of Montana. Like imagine being a football fan in Montana that's just gearing up to watch Bills Dolphins or even Ravens Browns. Don't hate it. And you turn on your screen and you're like, what? The 0-3 Bears against the 0-3 Broncos. Do either of these teams have a touchdown this year? Just, I'm so glad that I don't have to worry about that. Phil Green predicting the Bills win 70-17. NFL Sunday Ticket is a fantastic thing, and I'm glad I don't have to be at the mercy of what the CBS gods have, particularly living in St. Louis, where I'd be getting nothing but Bears, Titans, and Chiefs games. All right, Luka, speaking of other teams, hey, he says as a fun transition, let's talk about your locks, because it was a tough week for you last week. We, after a very strong week in week 2, you went perfect in week 2, if memory serves. Why am I even trying to guess? You've thought ahead. The record's on the screen. You're 5-4 on the season. And let's not look back. Let's look forward. Luka's locks coming up this week, and we're going to get into it right now. And Luka, for your week 4 locks, your first lock takes us to an AFC North showdown between the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. There was some news out today that Deshaun Watson may miss that game, but I saw some Cleveland beat reporters shot that down pretty quickly, saying he should be good to go. Looked like Deshaun Watson really found his footing last week after a couple of early season struggles. Looked like maybe the Deshaun Watson of old. The Ravens had a couple impressive victories earlier, had that stinker last week against the Colts. They have a very uncomfortably large injury report right now. Where's your head at with this matchup?
Yeah, just fun fact, we did have that perfect 2-0 week. And then last week, thank you one final time to the Packers for coming back from a 17-point deficit and actually doing the right thing by going for 2 when you should be going for 2 if you like to win, to hit the 2 unit, to keep us at positive units. And we roll into week 4, hopefully doing better than 1 and 2 after that abysmal Titans plus 3.5 and Broncos plus 6.5. Never betting the Broncos again. Anyways, we are on to week 4. We are on to the matchup that you brought up here, Ravens at Browns. And this game I had been keeping tabs on the whole week, and it was interesting because I believe it was 3 points for a large portion of it. And then all of a sudden, the Deshaun Watson situation, I believe, skewed the public and also just Vegas in general to make it more in line. And you have a wide variety of spreads out there, by the way, Josh, on this one. You can go as far as 2.5 and as down as 1 even for this game. Depending where you're going, the two primary books that I like to do here are DraftKings and FanDuel. FanDuel has it at 1.5 at -110 for each side. And then DraftKings is 1 even for -110 each side. Obviously, depending on which way you are skewing here, you want to find the best odds for you. But Deshaun Watson was questionable for a little bit, but it seems that that got shot down immediately. And it looks like everyone else that was on their injury report is good to go. It's the quite opposite, unfortunately, for the Ravens. You have massive individuals that are going to be out. You have Ronnie Stanley, their left tackle, who is listed as doubtful. You can basically assume that he's going to be out. You have two linebackers that are very important to them, Oea and Ojabo. Hopefully I didn't butcher those. They are out. You have Marlon Humphrey, who is out. You have Odell and Rashad Bateman, who are out. You have another couple questionable guys in Kyle Hamilton, Justice Hill, Tyler Linderbaum, although Tyler Linderbaum is trending towards playing for whatever it's worth. And then Marcus Williams, their free safety, is also questionable, although he is trending to be playing. But it's a long list of injuries. And I like what you brought up there as well in kind of introducing this game. Cleveland is playing the best they have so far. And they, to me, with Myles Garrett, who is my guy, I have a ticket, I have a slip that is for him to be Defensive Player of the Year, playing exceptional ball right now. And I think this defense is humming. I think the Ravens are not clicking on all cylinders on offense and being without their left tackle against a Defensive Player of the Year type of guy, although they moved Myles Garrett all over the place. Quite literally pre-snap, he will cause a false start if you tail him with two tight ends. Thanks for that, Titans. And then it's everything to me is trending to Cleveland. All of a sudden, the line moved in favor of Cleveland a little bit late because of Deshaun Watson news. So I'm taking the Browns -1 at home against the Ravens. Obviously, I mentioned the line disparity, so that asterisk next to FanDuel is because it is -1.5. I am putting -1 because I will be betting this on DraftKings to get my best odds for that. But overall, I'd like Cleveland to cover that point. I would like them to cover 1.5 if it was 1.5 across the board. I think this is the kind of game that, being at home against Baltimore, who's not on all cylinders and has a lot of injury concerns, they should be able to take care of business and get the job done against a divisional foe and keep it a rolling after a very impressive performance last week against the Titans at home.
All right, so your first bet of the week is Cleveland Browns -1 against the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to keep it in the AFC North as the Pittsburgh Steelers travel to Houston to take on the, check them out, Houston Texans, who went down to Jacksonville and blew out the Jaguars last week. CJ Stroud looks like he might be the real deal, which, as somebody who sat in this chair and tried to evaluate the draft, makes me feel good about things I said on draft night about CJ Stroud being the best quarterback in this draft. The Steelers have a young quarterback of their own, Kenny Pickett. Up and down season so far, probably mostly down based on what things look like in the preseason. Steelers are 3-point favorites on the road. So at least for 1 week, Vegas is not willing to give the Texans the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Vegas is telling you that win over Jacksonville, not as sustainable, maybe a little bit flukier. What does this 3-point spread mean to you, and who are you siding with in this matchup, Luka?
So I actually, in a weird way, think this line is kind of Vegas reacting to the Texans' blowout win against the Jags. And why I'll say that is the Texans did have a very impressive win against the Jags, but I feel like that's them just overlooking the fact or the dominance that is the Pittsburgh defense. And maybe they're just kind of still sitting there thinking about the 49ers game from week 1. But that is an absolute outlier if you really look at it. That is the best team in the NFL on week 1, coming to Pittsburgh and just taking care of business when they just were not ready clearly for that. And this is then, ever since then, they played Cleveland, who I just said has been rolling a little bit of late, but they got 2 defensive scores against them. And then, of course, had a dominating performance for the most part in Vegas on Sunday night last week. I love Pittsburgh's D, and I feel like it's disrespectful that they're only 3-point favorites at Houston because Houston's defense is not a world beater by any stretch. But then, just similar to, like I was talking about the Ravens, on top of it all, Josh, the Texans have an injury concern and an injury problem. They have 2 tackles who are already ruled out. They did not practice all week. They're all pro, Laramie Tunsil, and also Josh Jones, who they had recently acquired this offseason from the Cardinals. Denzel Perryman is also already ruled out, and Taveri Thomas, who's one of their depth corners, he is out as well. It does appear that Stingley Jr. is going to be back for them in the secondary, but overall, that tackle thing is a serious problem for them, and I could see some serious issues with Texans and kind of a fall from grace. If you're the Steelers, the thing you should be happiest about most is that the Texans are very happy and comfortable right now after a very impressive win they had against the Jags. So for a line of only 3, to me, that the Steelers need to cover against a Texans team who they should absolutely be able to handle a rookie quarterback over 60 minutes, TJ Watt should be having a field day. And fun fact about this game, Josh, if anyone is not aware, this is a JJ Watt going on the Ring of Honor game. And TJ Watt is, of course, in-house. And if TJ Watt loves to do something, it's one up his brother. And he already said that he wants the sack record this year. He wants to do everything he can to get JJ's name out of everyone's mouth that talks to TJ. And boy, would it be something if he has a 3+ sack night on JJ Watt night in Houston. Give me the Steelers -3 in Houston to ruin JJ Watt night for the Houston Texans. I love this pick so much.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, the Texans missing both offensive tackles. Luckily for them, the Steelers have nobody who can rush the passer on their team. That's just not something that Mike Tomlin defenses historically do at an elite level. TJ Watt, that's going to be a problem. I think I'm with you. I'm going to be rooting hard for the Texans just because I love what's going on with CJ Stroud. And now you're making me root for the Steelers because I want Lucas Locks to do well. So I'm kind of angry with you on that. And you're keeping it house again. It's going to be another AFC North team. We're going to hit every one of them this week. The Cincinnati Bengals got their first win of the season Monday night against the Rams. Joe Burrow was in the lineup after a lot of speculation he may not play. Did not look like himself. The Tennessee Titans have had a world of problems stopping the passing game this season. Number 1 receivers are just blowing up against them. And the biggest question this week is who will be the biggest beneficiary? Is it T. Higgins? Is it Jamar Chase? Is Joe Burrow up to taking advantage of that? Because despite the win last week, he did not look very good. I think that number is baked in, that concern, I should say, is baked into this number because if it were a fully healthy Burrow, I think we might see, a little bit more than a 2.5 point spread. But as is, the Bengals on the road at Tennessee, 2.5 point favorites. How do you see this one playing out?
So it's funny because part of me just didn't want to touch this game. I'll be honest. And early on in the week, because the Bengals were playing on Monday night. I don't normally like to do that when you have a team on a short week. I don't generally like to bet on those games. I like to have where teams are at equal kind of levels here. But there's 2 things going on. One, the Bengals finally got that win. They got a win in not the most impressive fashion, but there's something about getting an ugly win, especially in a public eye, that can be kind of boosting for a team, especially if they've been spiraling early on, like the Bengals seem to always do. But Joe Burrow looked like as the game was progressing, he was getting more comfortable in that Monday night game. And then the Tennessee Titans, boy, if I can't, they are the most disappointing team to me. I'll be quite honest this year. I felt like they should be a lot better than they are. And we've seen 2 performances out of them that have just been so uninspiring, so god awful. It's amazing that they only lost one of those games by 1 point. Then the Cleveland game we saw last week, they shouldn't even been on the field. It was borderline embarrassing. And then they're going to be without a couple key guys, mainly Peter Skoronski on the offensive line. He will be out. Treylon Burks looks to be out as well. You also have DeAndre Hopkins starting to have a little bit of a knock to him. There's a lot of stuff going against the Titans in this game, and the Bengals are starting to trend upwards. They're starting to get healthy. Everything's looking good for them. And look, history likes to repeat itself. The Bengals, as I mentioned, start slow. They start 0-2 a lot. And then all of a sudden they figure it out because Joe Burrow finally had his 2 preseason games being weeks 1 and 2. And then they start getting moving. The Titans' strength is the rush D. I don't think that really matters when it comes to the Bengals. They are a suspect pass D. Give me the Bengals -2.5. it is my play of the week. I love the Bengals to get back to 2-2 here against a Titans team that is struggling at this point in time and not really having a lot going on for them. It sucks because I do think highly of their coaching staff. I do think that they're the kind of team that can stay in games, and I don't like betting against them, especially when they're dogs. But 2.5 is not enough for me. I think the Bengals can absolutely win a field goal game. So give me 2.5 points absolutely for the Bengals to cover with the Titans, even though it's even in Tennessee.
You know, it's funny. Ryan Tannehill, the last few years, has always been one of those quarterbacks I think are kind of like Kirk Cousins, where maybe he doesn't get credit for being as good as he is. I think he's been very successful. Man, he looks like a shell of himself this year. It feels like that wall just smacked him in the face. And quite honestly, it looks like the wall may have smacked Derrick Henry too. He does not look like the same explosive running back. They are going to have a tough time moving the ball on this Bengals defense that I think is a very, very good defense. So I'm with you on that 2.5. So to recap Luka's locks, we have the Browns -1 at home against the Baltimore Ravens. We have the Steelers on the road -3 against the Houston Texans, and the Cincinnati Bengals -2.5 on the road against the Tennessee Titans. And that will do it for this week's edition of Luka's Locks.
There we go.
All right, Luka. Well, I do want to think there was something I just thought about with this Bills Dolphins game that popped into my head. And it just popped out of my head, and I hate when that happens because it was a point I wanted to make. It must not be that important, though. Any final thoughts on Bills Dolphins? Any matchups this week out that we haven't touched on that you're looking forward to? Anything NFL related you want to get into while I do the spin cycle in my brain, try to remember what I was thinking about?
Oh, there are 2 winless games going on this weekend that I will be keeping a close eye on because I love watching the bad get worse. Denver, Chicago, we joked about it earlier. Cannot wait to watch that one. And then you got Minnesota, Carolina. Cannot wait to watch that one either. Fun games this week for multiple of reasons. Of course, the high being the Dolphins Bills in my mind. The 1:00 slate, Josh, this week has the most entertaining games a 1:00 slate has had so far. Cannot wait. It's going to be fun. But with the Bills Dolphins, I just cannot emphasize it enough. It's going to be a great game of football, Josh. It's going to be so much fun. And if you are a general football fan, it is main screen worthy, even over the god awful NFL version of Red Zone, Josh. That
was so bad
to beat the drum on. It is. They need to fix it. They need to take whatever the producers did for the DirecTV version for all these years and just be like, yeah, do that again. Like, just keep doing that because whatever this is awful. And then I will say, I am also tuning in to the Toy Story version of the London game, Josh, with the Falcons and the Jags. They're doing a Toy Story version of it. Very intrigued by this. It will be on a TV in my house. Cannot wait to enjoy that while I'm eating my breakfast and getting the house ready for all my guests that come over every football Sunday.
You mentioned the London game, and next week that will be our reality as the Bills, win or lose, are traveling to London to take on these Jacksonville Jaguars at 9:30 in the morning on Sunday. That'll be fun. I just did think of my point. Costa had brought up Vic Fangio in chat, and I want to just say for folks that maybe aren't as clued into what that means, last year the Dolphins defensive coordinator was Josh Boyer, and boy, was he one of the most blitz-hack defensive coordinators in the sport. That is not what the Dolphins do anymore. Vic Fangio is very much I'm going to rely on my front four to get pressure. I'm going to keep it in front of me. So I do think that's one of those things that when you're expecting this track meet, we do have 2 defenses out there that historically like to make you earn it with long drives. Now, the Dolphins don't seem to care about that. They go down 3 or 4 plays regardless of what you're trying to do. But I do think that's worth keeping an eye on, that both of these defenses pride themselves in making you win death by paper cuts versus explosive plays. And maybe that's something, if you're looking at the over in this game, you might think it's going to be on the under. All right, Luka, we do have to talk about next week's show because I will not be here. I am taking my daughter to WWE Friday Night SmackDown. John Cena's in town. I have no idea what's going on in wrestling these days. My daughter plays the video game. She wanted to go. I'm excited to go. Luka, I believe we will have a show. It just is a matter of who's going to be sitting opposite you.
Yes, we will have a show. It will be live. It will not be a pre-recorded like we did for the Commanders. Tentatively right now, it is our guy Stokes that will be with me, although we need to await confirmation. He is, of course, a little occupied at this moment in time, and we're giving him his space and time in his own right. So just waiting to confirm that and everything of that regard. But we will be live next week. We will be talking preview when it comes to Bills in London at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. By the way, Tottenham versus Liverpool this weekend. Got that one on the dock. Oh, we care, Josh. In this household, we care. But the Bills will be in that stadium next week. They will be playing the Jaguars, and that will be most likely myself and Stokes talking about that game, which will be the second best game. No, I'm just kidding. No, I won't even go that far. But it will be a fun game to talk about on Bills Chat Live next week, even though you will be enjoying wrestling with your daughter.
I will be enjoying wrestling with my daughter. Hopefully, we're talking about the 3-1 Bills in London getting ready to take on the Jaguars and beat the Jaguars. Either way, win or lose this week, Luka and I will be back for the post-game show. Bills Chat will hit everywhere you can find your podcast bright and early Monday morning to get all of our thoughts. I will be going live at halftime on every Built-in Buffalo social media platform. Talk about what we've seen in the first half, what adjustments we can expect in the second half. Quick little 10-minute clip while the Bills are at halftime. Been getting a lot of good traction on that. A lot of people popping into chat. And then over on our Bills Chat YouTube channel, I'll do a quick hits recap of the game as soon as it goes final. 10 minutes that kind of sets the table for what Luke and I will be talking about on the larger podcast coming up on Monday morning. Luca, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think we have talked about a lot of things. I will say you did say explosives earlier. And every time someone says explosives, I just think of pew, pew, shots, explosives. Just got to put that out there. Sorry. No, I'm done. I'm ready for the show to end. If no one knows where that is from, I'm sorry that you do not follow the Arizona Cardinals. And that is probably for a good reason. Gannon was infamously put out a video from the Cardinals where he's like, Rondell Moore, we want shots, fires, explosives, pew, pew, pew. He did the sound effects, by the way. He did the sound effects. Wild video.
Was that viral preseason?
Yeah, the Cardinals themselves put that out.
Oh, God. That's the one people were making fun of. Yes, I have such a hard time watching videos pew, pew. When I know going in that somebody's going to embarrass themselves. Like, I really can't do it. I have no relationship to Gannon. I can't watch people embarrass themselves if I know it's coming. It just is so uncomfortable. So the way that I saw people describing it, I was like, nope, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, did you take the bus here and have fire in your belly? Oh my God. All this stuff. Dude, Gannon is a fascinating human. I would love to have a beer with Gannon. I would love to know what is going on between the ears because it seems like it's interesting.
For what it's worth, he's got them playing above their weight class right now.
He does. Unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to see it.
All right. Well, speaking of seeing it, you will see us. You'll see Luca next week in this chair with Stokes, hopefully. That's going to do it for this episode. We will see you next time on Bills Chat Live.